Hey guys, welcome back to Mondays at the Museum. I'm Carrie and I'm here at the Anna Bemis Palmer Museum in York, Nebraska. As mentioned last week, we're going to talk about the Smithsonian today, and more specifically James Smithson, whose money was used to basically build the entire institution and the research centers and everything like that. So James Smithson was born James Louis Macy in 1765. The exact date in 1765 is unknown because his mother actually went to Paris to hide her pregnancy, which I guess was a thing back then. He is the illegitimate son of an English duke. His name was Hugh Smithson, and he hated America. Just something to keep in mind for later in this video. His mother's name was Elizabeth Macy. He took on his father's name in 1901 after both of his parents died, so then he became James Smithson. So James was a descendant of Henry VII, and as such was quite wealthy. His mother put him in the finest schools that were available at the time, and he developed a passion for science. Eventually, he earned his master's degree from Pembroke College in Oxford, and he traveled extensively after that to conduct all sorts of research. Interestingly enough, he traveled all over the world except to America, which is another thing to keep track of for later in this video. He lived a really interesting life. As mentioned, he traveled a lot. He did a lot of research. He was in Paris during the French Revolution and was actually imprisoned for 2 years during the Napoleonic Wars, which was interesting. It doesn't say why, but he was in prison then. In 40 years, he was able to publish 27 research papers. The topics varied, but basically they were all on chemistry or geology or mineralogy. Of those, my favorite is probably the one on how to make a better cup of coffee. Interesting dude. On June 27th, 1829, James died at the age of 64 in Genoa, Italy. So how is he important to the Smithsonian, and why am I talking to you about this guy today? So basically, according to his will, his estate would go to his nephew, and that's the only heir that he had, was this nephew. However, if the nephew was unable to produce an heir of his own, then this fortune in its entirety would be sent to America to, quote, found at Washington the Smithsonian Institution, an establishment for the increase and diffusion of knowledge. When he died, it was a rather large sum of money. So they said that at the time it equaled to about $500,000, which in today's currency would be about $15 million. Kind of quite the donation. But the real question is why? He never came to America. He never talked about donating money to America. He never wrote about money being sent to America. So why did he choose to do this? Why choose us? There's a lot of theories out there. Some of them say it's because his father hated America, and because his father basically ignored him since he wasn't a legitimate son. This was like done out of spite. Others say that he admired the democracy in America. Others say that he was inspired by the Royal Institution, which he was a part of, but we'll never really know of the actual reason because, one, he didn't tell us, and two, all of his papers were destroyed in a fire, so there's really no way to look back anyway, even if you wanted to go digging through that stuff. It's basically down to your best guess, I guess. I like to think it's out of spite, but that's just me, and sounds like something that I would do. Regardless, he died. His estate came here, but it took quite some time for that money to actually reach America. It said that there were 11 boxes of more than 100,000 gold sovereigns, and it took almost a decade for it to reach America. And I'm sure that weighed quite a bit. When the money was given to us, it was just that vague, diffusion of knowledge statement. And a lot of people had a lot of different ideas for how to go with that. Do they build a museum? Do they build a library? Do they build research centers? What do they do with it? So basically what happened was there was 8 years of debate. And then August 10th, 1846, which is the anniversary from last week that we are celebrating, the president at the time, who was James Polk, signed a document that established the Smithsonian, and basically became a compromise of sorts. So it is museums, it is libraries, it is research centers all together. The document that he signed says that it would be a federal establishment, but it's not going to be part of the 3 branches of government, and that it's actually going to be run by a board of regents that have its best interest at heart. So for those of you curious about who currently sits on that board, you'd be interested to know that it is made up of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the Vice President, 6 members of Congress. Now there's 3 members of the Senate, 3 members of the House in that 6 members of Congress, plus 9 private citizens. The first thing that first Board of Regents did was they built a home location, and that became the castle, the institution castle. And if you've ever been to DC and you've seen all the Smithsonian, there's no mistaking for which one is the castle. It literally looks like a castle. And I'll be sharing some photos because we went recently and I took a ton. So the castle still stands today. It's gone through a lot of renovations over time, obviously, but now it actually holds James Smithson's remains. So what happened was he died in Italy and he was buried in Italy. But in 1904, they wanted to basically displace the cemetery that he was buried in to make way for a stone quarry. And a regent member at that time, known by Alexander Graham Bell, yep, that one, went to Italy to retrieve his remains, and he brought them back to DC on a ship. This was in 1904, and our friend Teddy Roosevelt, leader of the Rough Riders, you've heard 80 million stories from me on Teddy, he sent a Marine Corps band to greet them when they docked, and also sent them an escort to get them to the castle. James Smithson's coffin is now in a small mortuary chapel there in the northern section of the castle building there for the Smithsonian. So what has his generosity led to today? Well, as of 2023, right at this moment, there are 21 museums, several research centers, I think 9 of them, library archives, and even the National Zoo is part of the Smithsonian. These places are home to 155 million objects that help to basically reflect our culture. And because of his donation, we're able to not only preserve them, but provide programming worldwide, which I think is really cool. It's just crazy, like, you know, did he know it would be this big? Did he know what he was going to lead to? There's no way to predict something like this, right? I mean, you especially if you're doing it out of spite and then it turns out to be this big thing. I just think that's so cool. So, but anyway, that's all for today on James Smithson. Check out our social media this week. I'm going to be posting a lot of things about the different Smithsonian institutions. That's all for now. Have a great week and thanks for tuning in.